Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join a community cultivating civil discourse. Stay well informed while improving access to enlightening and thought-provoking programming for all.
I was 10, 11, 12, I don't remember, in line for the movies. And there were two guys in line in front of us, like 3 or 4 people in front of us holding hands. And my mother pulled me to her, not my siblings, just me, and looked at my father and said, "They're weird," which just made me look at those guys. And I went, oh, now I get it. I'm weird like they're weird. And I looked at them and I thought, they look happy, they look like they're in love. I'll be fine.
Inform brings you incredible stories.
I left 2 days before the revolution. It killed me so hard.
James has never experienced the taste of fruits that haven't been attacked by pesticides, just like he's never experienced a neighborhood that hasn't been attacked by bullets. Some things just go hand in hand.
People say what's on their mind.
I think that it is a cardinal sin to lie to the American people about war.
Partisanship is a version of narcissism.
In downtown San Francisco, the Commonwealth Clubs and Forum curates events that bring you face to face with the world's changemakers.
1/3 of the wage gains that women have made since the 1960s were made as a result of the birth control pill.
Twitter is a technology that I don't think we've seen before in this world.
Since 1903, the most innovative leaders have come to the Commonwealth Club to share their vision.
Sharing cars, sharing their homes, sharing. A shared dream, a shareable American dream. That could work.
You each can play a role in helping us chart a better future.
Housing and health and education and policy all live close to the surface in us when our children are murdered. It's all the same story.
We bring together the visionaries shaping the emerging trends in technology.
It was a combination of Instant and Telegram. It was the idea that you could take a moment in time and you could capture it and you could just send it out and broadcast it with the entire world.
I just threw this site together in about a week when I was at school.
Oh, great.
We've got angels, we've got incubators, we've got accelerators, we've got seed funds, we've got crowdfunding.
We eat. We drink.
One of our first dates ever, we pickled like 100 pounds of herring and made 300 pounds of sauerkraut.
Wow. Yay!
We never shy away.
75% of the people of this country want universal health care and expect it. And damn it, let's go.
Concentrated, deep, slow, loving, tender, passionate sex.
Whether you want to be on the cusp of current events or feast on pop culture,
I should have a great time writing it. I should write a book that is as fun as any party I'd be skipping.
Inform events are fun and action-packed. I have an anthropology scarf that does that twisty thing, so. Come feed your mind and soul and celebrate the future with Inform.
I love San Francisco, and every time I come back here, I remember that this is the only city in America that has magic.
Hi everyone, I'm Crystal Contreras and I'm the director of Inform at the Commonwealth Club. Welcome to today's program with award-winning and acclaimed chef Marcus Samuelsson. We're here today to discuss his newest work, The Rise, Black Cooks and the Soul of American Food, a cookbook. He will be joined by Inform Advisory Board member Anjali Menon. Most recently, she helped curate culinary dining experiences and partnerships as Vice President of Experiences at If Only, newly acquired by MasterCard's Priceless Marketplace. We'd like to give special thanks to Marcus Books in Oakland, California for fulfilling our book orders for this conversation. If you'd like to ask either of our speakers a question during this program, you can do so in the chat section of the live stream that you're currently watching. The Commonwealth Club has temporarily suspended in-person events, but we are dedicated to keeping you informed during this pandemic. We're going full speed ahead with the full slate of live online programming. Most of these conversations are currently free to the public, so we do ask that you consider donating to the club to help us continue our work. You can visit us at commonwealthclub.org/online to learn more, and you can also text the word donate to 415-329-4231 live during this program. Now, please join me in welcoming Anjali Menon and Marcus Samuelsson to Inforum.
Welcome to today's virtual program at Inforum with the Commonwealth Club. As was previously mentioned, I'm Anjali and I sit on the board of Inforum. And this afternoon, it's a pleasure to be in conversation with Chef Marcus Samuelsson. You may know him as a renowned world chef, a media personality, an author, and so much more. And today, we will be in conversation with him about his new book, The Rise. And for those in the audience, as was also reiterated, if you have questions, feel free to ask it in the chat on YouTube or the comments section on Facebook. We will try to get through as many questions as we possibly can. So now, without further ado, let's get started. Thank you so much for joining me today, Chef.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm in my restaurant here in Red Rooster in Miami, in Overtown, that we just opened through the pandemic. And I'm one more life experience richer to open a restaurant I've done many times, but I've never opened one during the pandemic. So I'm learning that.
That's absolutely incredible that you opened a restaurant in the midst of a pandemic. I thought that we'd start off the conversation a little bit about your background, just so people get to know a little bit about you. But I wanted to do it in the context of one of the chapters of your book called Migration. So you're just this incredible sort of like epitome of the American dream, right? You start off in a hut in Ethiopia. The kindness of a nurse gets you to, an adopted family. And from there, you are taken in, you train with some of the best in European culinary institutes, and you make your way over to New York. And, from there, I guess the rest is history with all your incredible achievements from the Red Rooster and so on. But I wanted to ask, talk a bit about how migration has played a part in your personal narrative and how it's informed your voice as a chef.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. That's what the highlight that you take out of that journey. I have completely different highlights. And so much about that journey, for me, it's about no one has ever done anything alone. First of all, the fact that, and also sometimes the worst that ever happened can also be the best that ever happened, right? I was born with tuberculosis. My mother had tuberculosis, my sister. My mother walked and took us into a hospital. My mother passed away. But even in that hospital, if I wouldn't have been lucky enough and the goodness of that nurse, I wouldn't be here with you today, right? And those journeys in Europe was also led by mentors, amazing mentors that saw something in me that at that time I probably didn't see myself. And also the fact that I had my parents. I had parents in Sweden that believed in my journey and supported my journey, even if they didn't know food necessarily as a restaurant, right? So I just think about that as it takes a village. I had that village. You need luck. I was fortunate enough to have that luck. But then when it comes to America, I also think that I'm sitting on the intersection between lawmaking is changed, right? Both in the sense of immigrants and Black people. Without the civil rights movement, which led then to all the different changes in the laws for people of color, but also for immigrants, right? So there's so many people have plowed generationally ahead of me for me to be able to sit here and enjoy the fruits. So for me, it's with that trampoline and background that I enter the world, right? So my work has to be added value, whether it's The Rise or whether it's Red Rooster. So I think about it from that perspective, and that goes into my work, my decision.
That's amazing. And I know that in your book, You note that food traditions are a mix of what you've carried and what you've picked up. And you actually note very beautifully in a passage, you say, I think about how recipes change as people move. They must. No matter how much we bring to our destination, something gets left behind. I find that so brilliantly put together because, a question that comes to mind is, how did you ultimately find your voice as a chef blending these different cuisines, and how do you decide what gets left and what gets carried?
Well, it's also a different time, right? Like, I think what's happening now, the last 5 years in food journalism and cooking, is the most important, interesting work for a long time. Because when I started cooking, the cooking that counted, mattered, was not just European food, it was only French food. So
right.
Chefs from all over the world has to unlearn their own rituals, or were constantly told that food doesn't matter, right? Maybe Italian food mattered, but it was traditionally just French food. And over the last 10 years, and through internet, we really have much, much, much more voices, whether it's Japanese, whether it's Southeast Asian, whether it's African. And these voices that comes alive, right? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write The Rise, because in terms of Black people, the contribution that Black people have done to American food is incredible. And the acknowledgement, it just hasn't been fair. It hasn't been, just like many things in terms of Black culture and Black history. So if you look at, you can't talk about American food without going through West Africa, right? There are 5 original cuisines that comes out of the African-American experience: Low Country, barbecue, Southern food, Creole, and Cajun. Those are all cuisines that are part of America, but all contributed by African-American experience. So yet, people know so little about where does this food come from, how did it get to our country, and what impact has it had on our culture. And I think it's extremely important that we go back and think about the authorship. We create real memories, and therefore we build aspirations. If the authorship is not acknowledged, right, we then don't know how to value it. And if we don't have the right value proposition and the authorship to it, we can't have the correct memories to these experiences. And therefore, the aspirations for, as a Black person, does food matter? Where's my role in food? Can I own something? So this is an extremely important journey that we're on. And it's an important time.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more, that concept of authorship. And let's dive into The Rise itself. So you showcase 150 recipes from Black culinary talent. And it's really the story of how Black culinary culture has not only helped shape, but as you rightly point out, actually been the fuel of American cuisine. And, technically it's a cookbook, but, and for the record, I noticed that it had gone #1 on Amazon cookbooks, and it's done amazing. So, but technically it's a cookbook, but it's been described as history, biography. I saw Gumbo for the Soul was something that somebody called it, which was incredible. And the New York Times actually called it a tool for change, which is incredible for a cookbook. So how do you describe this book, and what does it mean to you?
Well, it means a lot because, my books takes 4 or 5 years to make, and it's important to have something to say and stay open to move towards changes and so on. But I hope it will mean something for the next generation of chefs besides what it does for me, because I think this is essentially not just a book for Black people, about Black people. This is an American cookbook that we all can learn from, and we can learn about the incredible Black chefs that are in the neighborhood where you live, wherever that might be, right? How can I support Black chefs? And once you do that, you start understanding a little bit more about America's cuisine and American chefs, food in general. And, I had some amazing collaborator, Yewande, that made the majority of the recipes, and Moser, that was a photographer, and of course, Osai, my co-writer and co-author, and we all brought something. And Michael from the publisher that believed in this project, and that's really what it is. If we're going to rewrite and really give the authorship to where it's due in American food, it takes partnerships from all aspects, right? And the reader needs context to understand it. So it's a reimagining, and this is, when I started Red Rooster, the why I started Red Rooster in Harlem was because I really believed 10 years later what's going to come out of it, that Black chefs can have an incredible restaurant in their communities. We don't have to go outside our community. The Rise, in many ways, is a follow-up to that, to say, hey, to understand Black food is layered, it's complicated, it's delicious, just like our journey, because it's been represented in terms of traditional media. But Blackness is vast. You can be African-American like myself, coming from Ethiopia via Sweden, or you can be African-American like someone like Greg Godet that has Haitian roots and via New York and living in Portland. Or you can be African-American like Naisha Arrington that is Korean, Asian-American, and African-American. So Black food is not monolithic. It's not one thing. It has so many different rivers to it. And we do need, many different entryways to talk about race and culture. This is the most delicious one through food.
Absolutely. And I really appreciated that part of the cookbook, which was really highlighting that, as you say, Black food is not one monolithic thing. And you even had like an incredible story of Toni Tipton Martin in your book, where she says in the book that her food editors would actually correct her recipes when she wanted to do something that was more than soul food or mac and cheese. Mm-hmm. And so, that was crazy to me to hear stories like this.
Yes. And it's important that we have leaders like Toni, like we have leaders like Jessica Harris. But I think about the lineage of the incredible African-American women in this country that's been in food and been both activists and advocates. You think about Leah Chase, that, 96 years old, owned her restaurant from the 40s, right? And she was both an advocate and an activist. When people needed to get the Black vote, they needed to go through Dooky Chase. Her restaurant was illegal for years because she served both Black and white people. You think about people like Saphir White that worked for Lyndon B. Johnson, and he trusted her more than he trusted a lot of people in Congress, right? So Black women has always been the core of what kept neighborhoods together, what kept our food collective, like these rituals that eventually became the recipes. And I think it's fascinating to talk about it and imagine it in a day like this, when I think about someone like Stacey Abraham that completely changed the narrative of our country on a day like this, so we own so much depth and value to Black women in this country. And for years and decades, it's been so often underrepresented in terms of storytelling, in terms of media. And I just think about it from cooking. We wouldn't be nowhere with American food if it wouldn't be for Black women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So on that note, there were probably so many incredible folks from the community that you could have highlighted. How did you think about including the folks that you did in this cookbook?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, it's not a list. It's not like if you didn't make this list, you're not in the Rise.
Yeah.
And that's very, very important, because we could have done the Rise 4 or edition 4 and 5 if you wanted, because it's that many incredible people. But I wanted to show the plural, that we are many and we are all over the country, and not just chefs, right? Someone like Donna Pierce, that was the editor for the Chicago Tribune in Chicago. That we're in all over the country. Some chefs have worked with me at Red Roosters. but the majority have not. So we needed to tell Southern stories, immigrant stories, someone like Tavel Bristol Joseph in Austin, for example. There is one recipe where you hear and you see anonymous chef, and that is a Black chef with Mexican heritage that talks about the intersection between being a legal immigrant, but also being Black in Mexico on his food journey. So it's so much larger than you really can imagine, and it was important to have chefs that represented all aspects. Home cooks, some are professional chefs, the majority, but some are also home cooks.
Absolutely. Did you find that in highlighting these stories that you learned anything about yourself as a Black chef? Because really the whole theme of this is, what does it mean to be somebody in the culinary space who is Black, and what do those contributions mean? And I'm just curious if it elucidated anything in your own journey, because I've seen interviews of you in the past where you said to be a chef is to like understand myself more.
Well, I appreciate that, and I find being a chef is you got to stay true to your curiosity. You got to be curious, because every day there are changes that are happening in our environment and so on, right? And when you're a Black chef with a platform, you also sit on a responsibility and a privilege. So I am very cautious. It takes me a long time about what book am I going to do? What stories do we want to share and tell? How do we want to broadcast this? So I learned a ton, and it was fascinating to me to work with, chefs like Chef Michael that is in Nigeria now, for example, in Lagos. Where is food's going to go? Where is fine dining going to go? Maybe Africa is the next destination for fine dining. And then in the middle of this, of course, when we thought we were done with the book, COVID hit. So those first pages where I didn't know what would happen with my industry, I didn't know what would happen with my family, it really ripped my day-to-day structure out. And so I knew the book took a completely different shape. And we closed Red Rooster for 6 months and became a community kitchen and served over 200,000 meals in our restaurant. So those are experiences that you can't undo. And so to work on the rise during the pandemic, but also during this nationwide big conversation around race and culture during this era that we've been in, is almost overwhelming, but also it sharpens your pen and makes you realize you have to launch the book, you have to release the book. And I don't think it's ever been a more fascinating time to be a Black chef in this country.
Yeah, incredible. I wanted to touch a little bit on the COVID piece you mentioned there for a second, because I had read something like, the National Restaurant Association forecasts that $240 billion in restaurant sales will be lost this year. And I wanted to highlight that you particularly were able to open Red Rooster over town in the midst of all of this, while it's just a testament to sort of the immigrant mentality in you as a chef. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on how folks can maybe look to your example, or any advice you can give them, particularly folks of color in this industry who are being disproportionately affected by what is happening.
Well, I was very fortunate. We started, and then we had to shut for COVID again, and then we served the community here in Miami, and then we just said, no, we're gonna open. We're gonna open before the holidays, and I'm very fortunate. We have a team that supported me, but also it determined me even more to open. We started a fund called Black Business Matters, that to help other Black owned BIPOC businesses, food businesses, that we raised a lot of money for, that we're going to give out grants to. And I just think, again, like I am extremely privileged. I have many opportunities to get revenue stream from, whether it's from books or whether it's from media. But it did come down to that immigrant mentality. I'll say, hey, I'm not going to stop I have to navigate through this. I have to pivot. And opening the restaurant and finishing the rice was also documentation to my son, right? He's only 4. But when he's 14, 15, and, we just went through a historical year, I want Zion to be able to know that we did work through tough times. Our family did work through a very difficult time, but still we were able to launch a book, or I was able to launch the podcast, This Moment with My Friend. So it's important through all of this, to open things, because you're sending a message to the world that, hey, we're going through something, but you can't fight through it. And it's also job creation, right? Closing Red Rooster Rovertown meant that I had to say it was 90 employees that didn't get a job. So opening it means something for the 90 employees that got their job back. It's meaningful.
Incredible. So I know you mentioned your son Zion, and I was curious, does he or maybe your wife have a favorite recipe from the book at all, or even maybe just a fun recipe you guys have been making together as a family during COVID?
Yeah. So Zion loves to he cook with me or run into the refrigerator and just grab vegetables. And right now we're in Miami. It's very beautiful tomatoes, and the season is very different than in New York, and so on. But then he doesn't like to eat it. He just wants, the typical guy, just would like mess it up and hit the carrots and stuff like that. But and pasta is fascinating for him. We call it Sasas pasta in the book, where we take actually an Ethiopian Dorawat stew, a chicken stew that my wife and I make, that comes from my tribe, and it's a spicy chicken stew. Then the second day we fold it in with some rigatoni, and Zion, like a lot of kids, are fascinated by the shape of spaghetti that is so, one shape, and then you boil it and it gets soft, and so he loves stuff like that. I would say that's his most fun. But so like this morning we were supposed to cook, and he was so excited, cracking eggs and just getting excited. And then I was like, okay, let's eat. Not excited at all. He moved on to something else.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
Well, at least you have a budding chef, and you can eat his food. So you'll have lots of food for the family. Was curious also, any insider tips for people who buy the book? Is there a recipe they should start out first with? How should they navigate this book when they're opening it for the first time?
Well, I think it's bring your family together, cook together. But I would probably start with Miss Leah Chase's gumbo, because there's so much about the lineage between Africa and New Orleans. It's right there in that recipe, and her story is absolutely amazing. But also love some of those recipes because there's stories in there that are incredible. Chef Eric Kistel worked 25 years at Le Bernardin, 3-star Michelin. Relatively unknown story outside the industry, but an amazing chef. And that's, so his food is, he worked in France, he's French Caribbean, and his wife is Japanese. So we have everything from scallop with the soy beurre blanc to a wonderful sort of tartare that sort of has his French heritage. But I do think that, the book, whatever you think the food's going to be, don't come in with a set idea. Because once you add Blackness and Africa to it, our journeys are so vast. So just coming completely open and read and cook and laugh and cry and eat delicious food. That's the best way to go into it, because there's so many great recipes. The pantry, you might learn about new things like egusi seeds, which are Nigerian watermelon seeds that are toasted, that are absolutely delicious. Something almost like a pumpkin seed, for example. Food is also vocabulary that you can learn, and you got to sort of go through that awkwardness to learn almost like a new language. But once you enter it, it's so exciting.
That's amazing. I wanted to touch on a little bit of the moment that we're in. I know we touched on it a little bit, but you started this book almost 4 years ago with this idea, which is almost I mean, it was almost prescient, because today it's like there's this moment of Black Lives Matter and all of that. But 4 years ago, even as recent as that, to have that idea and to say, this is the story I want to tell. What does it mean to now have this book at this moment in time? Even with a new political administration and all of that that's happening, and how should people think of food, maybe not only just as food, but in the context of history and all the complexity around it?
The beautiful thing about America is that it normally leans in the better way. It might be a difficult way and process to get there, but it's kind of corrects itself. And I do think that this moment, maybe we had to go through this moment as a country in order to get the potential first female Black, Asian, and African American president in 2024. Right?
Amazing. Yep.
So it's not our journey. There's not a linear. It's never easy, and it's never what you thought it would be, right? And if any moment has taught us that, it's this moment right here, right? And as a Black chef, you never think about when is a good time to tell a story. It's always the good time to share a broader story about culinarians, I feel, because without telling the Black story, you can't tell America's stories about food, right? And we've always had this escapism of saying, European food is better than our food. If we start loving our food, all of our food in America, and understand it better, think what's going to happen with tourism. You go to Memphis and understand it in a completely different way. If we can go to a place like Overtown, Detroit, Harlem, with the same open-mindedness as we go to Tuscany or Sicily, for example, right? We would spend our money differently, we would look at the people differently, and we would come together as collective. I think a great way where I would love to get food to at some point is how America's relationship with music. You can't talk about American food without African American experience, whether it's gospel, R&B, rock and roll, hip hop, trap, you name it, or what era, funk. But it's all detailed. And if you write a song, it took a long time, but it's now acknowledged, right? So the authorship to the songwriter is now being acknowledged. And also, American pop culture, it's understood that it was built by all America, Black America as well, and it's documented both in movies, in videos, through records. And I hope one day that American food, Black food, can have its same journey as music, because then it wouldn't be as awkward. It would be natural to talk about it. And we would know who the people that created this, and we can actually learn to appreciate the people that are behind the curtain so often.
Yeah, that is one thing that you do highlight in the book. I mean, you say that Italian food became something that was so popular in American homes, and it was largely, lots of non-Italians making Italian food. And similarly, you have like kimchi has kind of arisen as something that is, in popular kind of culture. So how does the full scope of the African diaspora in terms of culinary talent get to a place that becomes, akin to those? And do you think that happens in your lifetime?
Yes, it happens in our lifetime. And yes, but it's such a good question. But food travels in a couple of different ways, right? Either through massive population and immigration, let's say China and India. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Big, and this is important, trading. Let's say Japan, right? We didn't know about Japanese food in this country before after the Second World War, when we, through the war and horrible history, but we started to trade with Japan. It wasn't aid. If we sent aid to a country, we always expect it to be cheap and all the products to be cheap. If we trade, once we buy Toyota, Sony, there's another level of respect and aspiration for the country, right? And So it's linked to our journey to slavery. It's linked to our journey of how we sent aid to Africa, but we trade with Japan, for example. So and then tourism. And tourism is built up through aspiration, through traditional media. So again, when people say, oh, go to Italy, go to Spain. Well, I would say, go to Memphis, go to Atlanta, go to Harlem. So if you build up this anticipation, you will then also have a tourism that is now willing to spend. And again, part of building Red Rooster was that I wanted the tourists to get off the tour bus, get into the restaurant, walk around in Harlem, and spend time and money in a way that we do in other parts when they go to Europe, for example. So how Black food and experiences and how we learn to experience and appreciate us as a country, we can't fully do that unless we look at these experiences and these stories are told in a way that glorifies us. Otherwise, the aspirations are not built up correctly. So it's a very layered, complicated, sometimes connected to loss. And I give you an example in the BIPOC state. Chinese food is always considered should be cheap, and Japanese food expensive. That is all connected to the laws, how we treated Chinese Americans and the Chinatowns, and who did the labor. And it's not correct. It's not right. Well, the more you understand about Japanese food, it's also 50-60% of its roots come from China anyway. So it's very, very complicated. But I do think we're heading in the right direction, and social media and more gatekeepers, so to speak, and more storytelling through more people. It's a very important part of this process.
Wonderful. I wanted to also get your thoughts just on fusion cooking in general, because I'm sure you've seen that concept evolve throughout your career, what it means to be part of that movement. And, how do you think about keeping that authenticity of some of the cultures that are displayed while innovating on kind of new concepts? And how do you see fusion as a sort of genre, if you will, kind of evolving?
Well, I think it's about acknowledgement. Like every person has a different journey, and if you and I would taste something, we would have different experiences, and I would be drawn to something that maybe you wouldn't be drawn to, right? And as chefs, we're the same. So, for example, I love Japanese food. I went to Japan as a teenager. I cooked there in my 20s and 30s. When you look at me and in my name, there's nothing that tells you that I should do that, right? But so when I think about a dish, I think about it through those building blocks very often. So, people can come and fall in love and understand something in a very personal way, as long as you then document and honors first your own passion, but then honors and acknowledge the people who got you there. So if you got something from a person, then you have to acknowledge that person, whether that's your uncle, auntie, or a writer, right? So I think I cannot tell another chef what he or she should be passionate about. Some people want to just cook their journey where they lived and it's their family's recipes. Other people, for years we were anonymous chefs and we only cooked French food, and we were Black people cooking French food, right? So now, since people have traveled and there's more exposure, the next 10 to 15 years will be different. I think it's good that we documenting this in a different way, but as young chefs, you should learn as much as possible. You should cook the food that you're passionate about, because that's the only way you're going to stay curious and be passionate about the business.
I love it. So I'm going to start wrapping up some of the questions here as we move into audience questions, but had just a few more questions for you. One is just, you've had this incredible legacy, James Beard Awards to cooking at Obama state dinners. I mean, you've probably done it all. So kind of like, what's next for you? Where can people find you at? I know you've got a documentary. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, I mean, on social media is probably the easiest. Marcus Cooks. And then, I'm very proud of the fact that we did open the restaurant here in Overtown. It's a very dear community to me. It took us 5 years to open the restaurant, but it's worth it. So I'm going to go back and forth between New York and Miami. And I've devoted my whole life to cooking. I've cooked since I was 17 years old professionally, and I love it. And I'm more curious. I'm passionate about food today than I started. So I want to help young Black chefs and mentor more as much as I can. And I want to make sure that we're telling diverse stories, because America is the country that can tell these stories. Because when we tell it, other countries are looking, watching, and it will trickle down to their local situations as well. So I do think it's a very, very important journey we're on. And I also feel so privileged to be part of a community that I can pick up the phone and, speak to Nina Compton or talk to someone amazing like Eduardo Jordan, or speak to an elderly, like Jessica Harris about, what was it before my generation, you know what I mean? So it's a privilege. And then speak to someone like Tiana G that is just 24 years old. So when you're in that sweet spot, when you can look ahead of you and behind you, it's your job to provide. And I feel like very much like I want to set stages for young chefs and have them realize their dream. That's a exciting journey to be on.
So on that note of helping young chefs, because I know you're super passionate about it. I read that one thing that you did before you opened up your first restaurant was you actually wrote down, I will open a restaurant. It's sort of like a manifesting kind of practice. Yeah. What would you tell young chefs that, have kind of the same dreams and aspirations as you do in terms of like the process of like getting yourself in that mentality?
Well, I would speak on it. Say it to your family, say it to your friends, and then show up. If there's a great chef in your neighborhood or you're out, close to your city, go to her or him and stage. Speak in your local schools or community colleges, because you don't ever know who's listening. For example, Chef Kwame spoke a lot at different high schools in the Bronx, and one day there was a literary agent sitting in that audience, and that's how he started his first book, which now is going to be turned into a movie, right? So you never know who's listening. So do pop-ups, even if the pop-ups are just for your friends and family, post it on Instagram. So be active in the space and find this balance between searching for your food, but also learn the traditional techniques, because cooking, it's a language where you got to crack some codes and really understand. Once that language opens up, it's an incredible language that you can travel with anywhere in the world.
Wonderful. Well, 3 rapid fire questions for you before we move into audience questions to kind of kick it off. So first question, one spice you could never live without.
Oh, easy. Berbere comes from Ethiopia. It's everywhere in Ethiopian food, berbere would be the one.
Okay, on that note, one dish from Ethiopia every American must try in their lifetime.
I would say dorawat is the chicken stew that is just, it simmers. It's really a bunch of onions that you cook down for about an hour or so on low heat. And then you fold in chicken meat that you let it simmer with lots of berbere and some clarified butter, and it's so delicious.
Oh, wonderful. And last question before we move into audience questions. If you could have cooked for someone in history, who would it have been and why?
Wow, I've been very fortunate to cook for a lot of different people. So, for me, I never cooked for Diego Maradona, the soccer player.
Soccer player.
Yes, and he was just such an icon to me growing up. So I never met Diego, and I even tried to sneak in Diego's name when we were naming Zion, but my wife was like, "No, we're not calling him Diego." Yeah, it would probably be Diego Maradona.
The hand of God, as they say.
Yes, there you go. Good, nice.
I've been to a couple World Cups, so I fully support that.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's move into some audience questions here. We've got some interesting ones from the audience.
Yes.
Vendette here says, Chef Marcus, how do you suggest cooking eggplant and mustard and turnip greens? How can this taste delicious?
Oh, well, the eggplant, I would put them on the grill with the skin on and grill them for a long time, cook them down, then scrape them out. And the radishes, I would char in a pan, but, cut them into pieces and then maybe just hit them with salt and char them, salt and a little bit of sugar. And was it mustard greens or what was the other one?
Yeah, it was mustard and turnip greens.
Yeah. So, we can make a great dish here. So your charred eggplant, I would puree it with some roasted garlic, olive oil, and that's your almost like a puree, almost like a hummus. And then I would probably in the end just fold in some avocado just to get a little bit of creaminess into that. And then I would char my my vegetables, season with salt and a little bit of sugar to caramelize them. And then the mustard greens, I would just chop up and fold in. Now you have texture that is creamy, you have heat from the mustard greens, and you have this beautiful bitter and saltiness coming from the vegetables. So, yeah.
You heard it here first, everyone.
Maybe some raw apples. Just chop up some apples and Granny Smith just to get some natural water and sweetness in there.
There you go. The next question: Are you following the chefs of color on TikTok? She says, I know chefs aren't usually fans of short form food content, but these folks have helped me a lot during quarantine.
I think it's a very nice question, but I just opened a restaurant during the pandemic and I have my 4.5-year-old son with me. If I would find one more second in my day, I would use it to sleep. I'm gonna give me a month. I'm gonna have to catch up, and then I'm gonna look at what was the call? It was called Chefs of Color on TikTok.
Yeah, Chefs of Color on TikTok.
Noted, but I'm not. But I might follow it now. Yes. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, you also heard that here first. Okay, next question. Do you think the global kitchens serving food to the needy will continue post-COVID-19 pandemic?
I think what Jose and World Central Kitchen has really shown is that there is an enormous void and someone has to step in and fill this. And whether that's private or public, World Central Kitchen there's an enormous need that we have to fix. And I think World Central Kitchen and Jose's group are very well suited to take over that role because they've been through so many difficult situations and they've built up so much know-how on how to navigate and how to get from A to B to Z because it's such a logistics job. So I hope it does, and I know Jose is very committed to this. And I believe it will continue because the need is definitely there.
Yeah, wonderful. And on the same note of sort of, things happening during the pandemic, beyond ordering takeout, what can everyday people do to help the industry right now, particularly Black Americans?
Well, I love that. Thanks for asking. I think there's many ways to engage in your local community with restaurants. For Black and BIPOC restaurants, hey, you can buy some swag. Some restaurants have swags, right? There's a hat or a T-shirt. That definitely helps out, whether that restaurant has a book or not. You can also get your community, your Facebook friends or friends to order from that place, takeout, because that's a big deal. It becomes more orders, right? But then also, we all have different skills. If you come from the marketing side, volunteer. Say, hey, maybe we run your social media platform for you for the next 2 months. If you have an economic background, maybe you help that restaurant with the books. Because the cooking part of the restaurant, very often each restaurant is chef got, but it's always these other 10, 12 jobs that it means to run a restaurant that gets expensive to outsource. There's so many different ways that you can go into your community, look for these incredible businesses, food businesses, and you can help out and be supportive. Ordering is one way, but also lending your skill is another way.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick, for that question. Next question. What dishes are bringing you happiness and warmth during the pandemic?
My wife and I, we cooked a lot more than ever. And it's like, we ate a lot of vegetarian food. And it was something that I wanted to do and really explore more. So it was, it's springtime was a great time to cook radishes, to get eventually going into the summer, obviously I had beautiful corn and beautiful tomatoes and so on, and fall as well. So, we became vegetarians for 6 months and it was great. It was a great experience.
That sounds very healthy.
It's delicious.
Tara
it was delicious and it was different and I had to challenge myself and it was great.
Wonderful. Tara has a question around just food being political, and she wanted a little bit more insight into the extent that food and politics kind of interplay.
Food and politics is definitely a very, very close relationship because by buying food, you make a decision on which farm are you buying it from, or even the way U.S. trades with food, right? Tariffs on cheeses and wines makes it harder for restaurants to sell it and more expensive for the consumer. So who we buying things from? I mean, everything around food is political, right? And I know it's a big answer, but it truly, truly is. From fair trade to how we label something. For years, we said, oh, I want to get some Belgian chocolate. Well, there's no cocoa beans in Belgium. They'll come from Ghana. Right there, you take the authorships out of Africa and your license is back into Europe, and all of a sudden you think it's a premium product. If that's not political, I don't know what is.
All right. I think we have one final question here, although if there are any more questions, keep them coming. What are you most excited for as it relates to the future of Black cooking and the culinary talent that you've now highlighted throughout the course of writing this book?
I'm excited about, the next 10, 15 years about food in America and Black food in America because there's more talented people than ever. There's more channels to tell those stories, right? Whether it's through books or through social media or through, traditional TV. And there's more Black people in leadership. Don Davis is the head of Bon Appetit now. Tony Tipton Martin has a leadership position. So there is rooms for many, many more Black editors and executives in food, but we're also making big, big, big strides forward. And I think it's going to be tough coming out of COVID, but then it's going to get better and better. I always lean towards positive. So I have to.
So lots to look forward to. Well, I lied. We always have one final question, as is in-form tradition. So what is your 60-second idea to change the world?
Through food. I mean, I think that changing the world through becoming greener, to the intersection between green, tech, and consumer and guest, something we all have to work on. Because we have to work on the environment and we have to make food much more fair and equal and equitable. And I think, we're well positioned for it. Now we just got to go out and do the job.
Wonderful. Well, Chef, I think that was indeed the last of the questions. So I wanted to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share with us the incredible knowledge and wisdom that this book has, everybody, please go out and buy the book, The Rise. It's available now at your preferred bookstore, including Marcus Books in Oakland, California. Special thanks to them, Marcus Books, for partnering on the program with us today. And I just hope that, to what you have said in this program, that folks will really take in the breadth of the African diaspora and all of the Black culinary talent that is here, and that cooking pasta becomes as synonymous as cooking from any one of the recipes in your book. So thank you so much, Chef.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. And to those who are watching, if you'd like to watch more programs like this, please visit commonwealthclub.org/online, and you'll find many more programs like this. I'm Anjali, and thank you so much, and hope you all are staying safe. Thank you.